All right, everybody. This is Blake with DZone. We've got a very special guest. They work at Sysdig. They also do one of the coolest podcasts that you'll definitely want to learn about. We are here at KubeCon. I don't know if it's day 5 or day 2 at this point, but it's really great to be back in person. Our very special guest today is Dan with Sysdig and the 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 POPCAST. And so, tell people a little bit about yourself and Sysdig, what's going on.
Sure. So my name is Dan Papandrea. I'm the Director of Open Source Ecosystem and Community for Sysdig. I'm a CNCF ambassador. I'm also the executive producer of CloudNative.tv, which is the CNCF Twitch. Yeah. In terms of KubeCon, I'm here, as representative of not only Sysdig but also the CNCF. There's so much great things. KubeCon to me is like our World Series. It's our World Cup. It's all of it all boiled into one. But yeah, just enjoying it.
Yeah, so really cool. So with the let's start with Sysdig. Any sort of new cool stuff that just came out here at KubeCon that people should know about?
Oh, without a doubt. So I'm also the community leader for Falco. Falco is the de facto runtime security intrusion detection tool for Kubernetes. CNCF project, incubated project. Love this community. Came in. We had a very cool set of core maintainers that we've had experience contributing to, like Kubernetes and other projects. And I wanted to make Falco that kind of thing. And our community is fantastic. Had a lot of contribution from various places like, AWS, IBM, and also individual contributors. It's, we have a contributor of the month we give out, like, some free stuff, some cool swag and stuff like that. But loving it. But in terms of the KubeCon, we announced Falco Cloud, Falco plugins technology, which allows you to, like, instead of just doing container and Kubernetes as well, you got a whole cloud. So you can, like, basically, we see like 10 rules in that for you to be able to see, okay, somebody's looking at an S3 bucket or S3 logs, and you can see that data and then create rule sets on top of it. So really pumped about that. It's just extending that capability that we have with Falco and extending it into full cloud, like almost CSPM level capabilities.
Yeah, what I love with that is, for a lot of developers, is there's feature updates that make everything infinitely more complex, and then there's ones where it makes things easier.
Yeah.
And so this is,
And so this plugin system just allows anybody to create that, taking that grapefruit of knowledge and just kind of bring it, like, instead of having it through a straw, you're going to have it through like a full, pipeline of data that you can bring into Falco, and also use this YAML set of rule sets. So the way that Falco works is we tap into the kernel through a convention like eBPF or kernel mod, and then allows it to, like, have this rule set that says, okay, there's some syscalls that are happening, and I want to say if somebody terminals into a container or somebody writes to an S3 bucket, send output. And so you can output the standard out, you can output to HTML, and all that. But we also extended it, and this was an external contributor. This guy in France, his name is Thomas Lebarusius. He contributed Falco Sidekick, and it's this thing. It's a sidebar that basically a daemon set that literally just takes that data and can extend it to send it to Slack, PagerDuty, Knative. If you want to say like a rule's violated, I want to have it like actually like intercepted and stop the container when it happens. So we wrote if you go to falco.org, there's a blogs page. There's a 9-part series of all of these response things you can do. And what I love about it, nothing from the Falco contributors. A couple of them, all externals. All external contributors all did that, and it's all based on Falco. So I'm so happy to be a community leader for Falco because I love the growth. I mean, in incubation, we're at 8.2 million Docker pulls. We're at 31 million Docker pulls. We know it's on the CKS, for instance. That's there. So loving the growth of Falco, and also just loving being here and having people coming up to us and saying, "Wow, Falco is awesome. We really want to do this, and this." That to me makes me pumped.
Yeah, it's not when the companies say everything is we're the greatest. It's when the customers say it, right?
Yeah, or the end users, right? And they're actually going back and contributing. That to me is like awesome.
Well, the interesting thing that you just said, like for community, a lot of times there's communities, but it's where people are in the quicksand of needing support.
Yep.
But you're talking about where you actually have builders, people that can actually go in and contribute either through building or I guess even like providing feedback, right?
Well, that's the beauty, again, of our community. It's direct feedback. Oh, we don't have a kernel module for, XMI, AMI. Okay, well, here's driver kit. I can go and contribute that right now and do a PR. And in the next build, I think we do builds like once a day. You're going to have that in the next build for the next day, right? direct community contribution. And again, using those underlying libs that we have people like creating brand new security like paradigms, like GitLab. GitLab just came out with like a threat hunter tool based on Falco.
Wow.
Sumo Logic, all of these. So we want, like, the way that I see it, I think that what Kubernetes is to distributed computing, Falco is to runtime security, period.
Yeah, and I think that's brilliant. So if you're a developer working in the space today, and if you're going with a solution, you don't want to basically have no one you can talk to. Mm-hmm. You get a data sheet, something like that. If there's something goes wrong and there's no community, no one to talk to, that's a really bad thing. But what Dan is talking about here, you can be a part of a community of active builders, other people that basically help you out. So you're never in the dark. And so that's a really great part when you're working with it.
It's almost like you also have, like, if you look at a 100-yard race, you already have 50 of those yards taken care of by the Falco libs. You don't have to, understand full aspects of syscalls or eBPF and all that as a developer. You could just use these libs and say, okay, now I can just, extend it with the plugins capability we have. Again, I love this. Like, it didn't just come from Sysdig; it came from the community, and and Sysdig, contributed this capability and said, okay, developers, go play. Let's do some cool stuff together. Can I use the? I can't use that word. On my show, I can. So,
nice.
Yeah,
we get the meaning for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, and we talked to some people here today. One of their 2022 trends is making the developer experience better and with less friction.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of a interesting thing. And a lot of what you said basically speaks to that.
No doubt.
Like, you're already way ahead of that curve.
Sure.
I go to some websites at the top, there's 20 different links for developers. And so you're like, where do I go? Right. So it's just so crazy.
No doubt.
And then on the POPCAST, and I keep almost wanted to race past that, because when I hear Pop, I think of the San Antonio Spurs coach, but
Popovich.
You just call him Pop, right, in Texas.
Oh, okay.
So the interesting thing there is, so everybody's always looking for a great podcast. So tell people a little bit about the history of your podcast, how you got into it. I know you say Beyond the Code.
Sure. So the POPCAST, like and subscribe at POPCAST Pop on Twitter if you want to take a look at it. But the POPCAST I started in the beginning of the pandemic because I enjoyed hanging out with my friends and talking at conferences, right? You had these conferences and talking about technology, and those hallway tracks and talking about technology. And started the pandemic, you couldn't do that, right? So I was like, I want to kind of relive that. So we started going, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want this to be where somebody tells me about their product and it's like, no, I want to get that personal story. So right. My kind of thing is connecting people connecting people from the technology, the people behind the code, right? So that connection to me is really important, because then you can see things like, okay, Redbeard, for instance, who was at CoreOS for a bunch of years, he's a great human being. Like, you understand how they tick. If I have Kelsey on, Kelsey's going to tell me about, when he did his hidden figures to KubeCon talk, right? It was, why he did that, right? Or like all the godfathers and godmother of Kubernetes, like, Sarah Novotny and Beta and all those folks, kind of telling behind the curtain what created this amazing community that we have. Not just show me what where the Kube API is and where all of the all of the various like components that are Kubernetes. It's you get the stories behind that, and I love it. And to me, I think the views have really grown. Where if I was looking, I think we're probably the number one podcast in cloud native, and I love the fact that like people are interacting and we had, I did 7 shows in 1 week last week. So It was like, just the leading up to KubeCon, the KubeCon PreShow. So, it's been a great experience.
And yeah, what I love there, so if you're looking for a podcast, the ones I don't like, where it's like everyone's reading from a teleprompter.
Yeah.
And I love, like, when you check out Dan's, like, the views are like off the charts compared to anything else you see. So I think that speaks volumes. But it's like if you were to walk into a neighborhood bar with 2 like best friends talking, like every guest, like basically that I went through, didn't get to go through all of them. It feels like you're having this natural conversation with best friends, and not the usual, here's a great thing where everything worked perfectly.
Right. And
so you get like the real world stories that oftentimes you kind of race past with press releases and other stuff.
Yeah, and that's the gist of it again. And I've seen so many of these fireside chats and all of this. I'm like, oh, I always, I ask a question. I start with the journey. It's like, what brought you to here? That's
Right.
more interesting a lot of times. Like,
Yeah.
having like, talking to Katie Gamanji, who was on to talk about end users. She wanted to be a pilot. It's like, and you understand. It's like, she wanted to like understand things about, you know, technology and doing development because she wanted to be a pilot and she wanted to understand the software that has to do with that, and that's what got her into that. Or like I had Brandon O'Leary from GitLab. Yeah, wonderful dude, and we're talking about, I think we spent maybe 20 minutes on an hour thing, like maybe 10 minutes on GitLab and the rest on crab cakes. I mean, it was literally like that, right? So yeah, so I
and GitLab went public today. That's crazy.
Congratulations, man. Sponsored the podcast as well. So
very, very cool. And then for anyone that's like kind of coming in new to the podcast, is there like a few episodes you would recommend first? Or just go to the channel and hit subscribe?
Which one's your favorite? It's like, they're like all my children. I got 2 kids, but I got 89 episodes that are all my children, right? So, I mean, there's so many. We did the season 1 retrospective. Stephen Augustus, who had a keynote today, has been on twice. He's one of the two times on the show. Kelsey always just is amazing. Redbeards is a great episode because we did 2 hours of that one, and at the end, I mean, he broke down, and it was talked about ADHD, talked about early Core OS. I mean, that to me was just a great episode. But the ones that I get the most response on are the ones that are just like, like I had Holden Carell on, and Holden was talking about like, pronouns, and we had that discussion about it, and it was wonderful. It's just hearing different perspectives, not just one side. You have from so many different perspectives here. I've grown as a human being because of it. I've learned so much from it. So thank you, community, for helping me grow.
Yeah, it's great. And like the interesting thing that I kind of mentioned, it seems like for a lot of the guests, do you already know them? Do you already have this shorthand? Because everyone feels like your best friend. And that's just such a beauty, like when you're like doing podcasts, that kind of art of that, right?
So I'm from a big Italian family.
Okay.
And what you do in Italian family is like, hey, let's go, have a meal and let's talk.
Right.
And so, a lot of them, folks I see, like Joe Duffy is an example from Pulumi. Joe Duffy was on, and I talked to him at a New York meetup, and we all had dinner, like, hey, and I just called up Joe. I'm like, hey, Joe, you want to be on the show? Like that kind of thing. So, I mean, sometimes it's hard to get certain guests on, like it's hard to get clearances through PR and all of that fun stuff, but it's literally, sometimes I call up my friends and be like, hey, you want to come on and, talk about it? And, or I have a Git page that's, you go to at POPCAST Pop, there are all the links there. The Git page is somebody could say, who's the next person you want to have on? And we've had folks like that have volunteered to have on, like Novotny was one. And I knew Sarah a little bit. I didn't know as much. And now, she was on the show, and it was a wonderful show. So
very cool. And then speaking of KubeCon, I assume you've gone to several KubeCons. Any sort of memorable experience? And what do you see? Like, maybe the attendance isn't the same this year, but it's still a great start, right?
It's I like, again, the health precautions that are done are wonderful, just to make people feel safe. I mean, you have wristbands if you don't want to come closer, you want to fist bump and stuff like that. I think that's a good thing. San Diego was great, right? It was great, definitely a good experience, and here again, LA, it's been a great experience. The events team, by the way, just so close to my heart. The CNCF events team has been amazing. So I co-chaired 2 events here as well. The CNCF or EBPF Day. Which we had, like, it was Sysdig, Silly Myself-Allen, and Microsoft Keenvolt, and we talked about EBPF. We had people practical examples of using EBPF. So we had Scion, Google, Apple talked about Falco, which is so close to my heart. Props to Apple. That was wonderful. And then secondly, we had the Cloud Native Security Day. And that was a full day. We had a CTF, capture the flag. We had a whole day of talking about all these technologies, but I said it was like all in one place. Security in itself can't be solved by a single vendor. It can't be solved by a single project. It can't be done by a single tool. But if we do it all together in terms of having reference architecture and all those things, that's the paradigm that's amazing about tag security. That's the thing that's amazing about community. So to answer your question, this is different, and we're going to be doing these virtual things forever. it's just a matter of, for the bit. And I think what's being is having to adjust to that virtual, function. So, yeah.
And with all the KubeCons, do you have like one moment that's kind of like yours, like memorable moment or a moment that just really stood out you thought was great in your experience?
I'm going to be selfish. And I'll say yesterday on Cloud Native TV, cloudnative.tv, which is the CNCF Twitch, I got to literally do a panel, like a KubeCon wrap up with one of my heroes, Stu Miniman, who used to be on Cube. Yeah. So he's a red hat now. And it was such a joy to see him work with him, like, kind of the old school and the new school. And we talked to Priyanka about, we talked to Priyanka about her keynote. We talked to, Vijay about his keynote. We talked about Tim Pepper, and it was just awesome. Just people were coming in, but that to me is a highlight. But in terms of in general, like the highlights that, Steven's keynote was amazing this morning. And I'll tell you why it was amazing. There's many reasons. This man and Constance Carmanoulis and Jasmine, they've been the co-chairs for 4 events virtual. And this is the first time they're in front of people. That to me was a joy to see Jasmine, to see Steven, to see Constance in front of people instead of, on that virtual podium. So,
right. Yeah. Very cool. And then kind of interesting thing. So for talking about careers, like, how did you get into this space, right? So now you got the podcast, you got the community, you got all this stuff, but is this where you like started out? Like, where did you how did you land here?
So I worked for an investment software company initially. It was a company called Advent, which is now SS&C. And I was the director of IT there. And we had a flagship product called Geneva. It was an in-memory database with like extractions of like portfolio data for hedge funds and all of that. So I ended up joining a lot of sales calls. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to be in sales at this point. So I moved into sales for, I worked at the company for 16 years. And so it's for 10 of those years I was in sales. And then I saw like constantly like seeing this, people trying to distribute computing and all this, people trying to look at cloud. So then I went to HPE and, Helion, which is the OpenStack kind of, deployment. And then I saw something called Staccato and Eucalyptus. And these were technologies. Like Eucalyptus was basically, this might sound familiar, but like taking all of the Amazon services and moving them on-prem, Outpost and all, to think about that. And then I saw Staccato, which was a PCF, but running on containers, right? As schedulers running on containers. And this is a predecessor to Kubernetes. I'm like, I saw containers and I'm like, this is magic. And I love this space and I want to be in this space. So then I got a job at Sysdig, which, working for Loris Dijon. He's one of the guys that created Wireshark, wonderful tool. And so I'm like, this guy, when I was a director of IT, I used Wireshark to troubleshoot like spanning tree issues on there. So in terms of Sysdig's been wonderful. I was employed 20 there, and just seeing this company grow into this amazing thing and what we're doing, I just got involved more at the POPCAST with the community, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to do something more in that vein. So that's when I moved into director of community, open source community for Falco and all that. So there's my journey.
Very cool. But as a little kid, would you say would you look at it now and say, hey, this is exactly where I thought I would end up?
Nope.
Would you think
I want to be a musician, to be honest with you. So
what kind?
I play guitar. So the opening of my show is my band playing in CBGB. So I don't have.
So you get your own band too?
Yeah, I had a band a while ago. Yeah, I don't play anymore, but like in live. But that was the opening of my show is that. So I don't have to pay anybody any royalties. So that's cool. So.
And tell us a little about your band. That's cool.
Band was called Mad Machinery, and shout out to Dino Cavelli. Him and I went to college together, and so that's how I got into computers, because we were always fixing the Mac lab.
Okay.
I was fixing this Mac lab, and I was like, oh man, it's like, oh, we got to defrag the drive and all this, and I got a job at Comedy Central Television Network before Advent, and this is '97. God, I'm old, and it was right when South Park hit. So I saw and Matt and Trey used to come into the New York office, and they were wonderful, smart, and funny dudes. They would just leave funny messages on my thing. Come up, they'd be like, "Hey, Pop, what's going on? We just want to shoot darts." Oh my God, my computer sucks. Get up here. They would do these kind of things, right? So, yeah,
cool. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, and shifting gears to trends, what's always interesting to me, there's a lot of hype around stuff, but from what you're seeing, talking to people, what are some of the things that you're seeing people hit with this year? And then if you look in your crystal ball, is there something we're not talking about enough that you see being really impacted in 22? And is there anything that excites you?
Three things. I mean, securing software supply chain. I mean, we've heard this ad nauseum, this whole place. I think that's a big thing that we're going to see a lot of, folks after, SolarWinds, right? And by the way, they were at the software supply chain con that happened on one of the Day Zero events. Seeing some of those technologies that I think now and into the future, people embedding that to be able to secure their pipelines, it's big. One close to my heart is eBPF. I mean, there's so many cool things happening with eBPF on the networking side, on the security side with Falco, and also on the troubleshooting. There's, Derek Parker was in our eBPF. He works for Red Hat, and he was debugging, showing how you debug, syscalls and how you debug the eBPF programs, because we want more people to get into that space and expand this. This is like, eBPF is like a little pinhole into the kernel without having to contribute to the kernel, right? It's like these technologies are just revolutionizing how developers can observe, how they can secure, how they can troubleshoot. So that's cool. WASM's been incredible. A lot of, talk about that multi-cluster stuff. So like, the innovation that we're seeing on so many fronts is incredible. There's so many great technologies. I think it's not so much just, hey, here's a technology. It's the adoption. How easy is it for you to write that eBPF program? How easy for you to do that WASM thing? How easy is it for you to secure your pipeline? So you think about what, the folks like the SIG store folks are doing, like in terms of like signing containers and all that fun stuff. It's fundamental technology that people are going to need to be able to make this thing even bigger. So I'm excited about all of them.
Oh, very cool. And the interesting thing I always find, like with security or startups, there's this big push to deploy faster, move faster, right? Mm-hmm. But then with security, it's almost like there has to be an outage, there has to be an issue, and suddenly budget comes out for it. It's almost like they're just too often you just see it's almost like this kick the can. Like we're going to get this, we know we need to do it, but it's almost like it comes too late in the process. It's not like in that day one planning.
Accenture put out a stat, $2.6 trillion is lost in cybersecurity issues, in misconfigurations, and all of those types of things. The company needs to address these things. And I think, having an open source kind of underlying capability and having a commercial tool that's going to pretty much give you a platform to do that. So the customer can really work on their business applications, their business needs. I don't think at this juncture, like somebody should build, they can take the components that are out there, but there's all of these things there's things that like, again, talking about Sysdig secure platform literally will do all those things. We have CSPM capability, has, network capability, has runtime and forensic capability based on Falco. In that thing, I could basically go from a perspective of, if I'm building this application, I'm running this application, I'm post-mortem, I can understand everything that happens. So think about that SolarWinds example that was there. Somebody came in, dropped something in a pipeline, and it was anomalous behavior. That anomalous behavior was it went out to an external network, it grabbed some outdated package, put it in here from a builder machine that was under somebody's desk. Runtime. People are thinking, you need this capability to be able to see what happened. This is anomalous behavior, and shut it down.
Right. So very cool. And then two more questions. So then
I'll do this all day, Blake. I'm having such a good time, man.
All right. Thanks, Dan. So often, like for us, like we get a lot of developers, software professionals that check us out. But one audience is like people that could be in middle school, high school. They're like, hey, industry is amazing, but how the heck do I even get started? So for someone looking to get started with cloud native, Kubernetes, what is some career advice? They want to get started in the field, but they don't know where to get going.
Shameless plug. Again, EDU is a show on Cloud Native TV. It's from Kunal. Kunal, I'm sorry, I can't say his last name, but Kunal, right here. It basically has resources for students to go into there. But even beyond that, it's the folks that are like these beginning folks that maybe have not touched this technology. There's, in the random channel on CNCF, we've pinned something that basically is like a list of resources. Like there's a Kubernetes contributors page, which, shout out to Contribx, contributor experience, awesome people that really want people to be, come in and be inclusive of folks that are coming and doing stuff. So there's resources from that perspective. And the other thing is the barrier to entry is much easier than it used to be, right? It's literally like it used to be to build Kubernetes, you needed, 6 boxes and you do all these things and blah, blah, blah. Right now you could spin up Sivo Cloud has something like I can spin up an instance in 90 seconds with K3S. I can use K3S on my home, NUC or something and be up and running, and I can test some of these technologies. So if the barrier entry to somebody to learn Prometheus or Falco is much more simply. So those resources are there. Googling things, go in that random channel. Dims is a great dude. He's at VMware. He compiled this list that's in there of all of these great resources for you to contribute. So again, this is where somebody coming in not knowing, don't feel like ashamed to ask these questions. That's what this community is for.
It's amazing. And you got the community to support you as well. So if you're just getting started, so that's a lot of great resources. And just lastly here, so what else can people look forward to with Sysdig, POPCAST, anything else kind of exciting that you want to give a shout out to? You're on Twitter again, so make sure we get some of those resources and where people can find you.
At POPCAST Pop, follow us on Twitter. A lot of great guests. We're going to be doing some shows for reInvent. Next year, I'm taking the show on the road, I think. We're doing not only the people behind the code, we're doing the cities behind the code.
Wow.
So it's pretty exciting. And that's going to be, like I said, we're having like a documentary film team come and do all of these things. It's like going to Raleigh, going to you know what I mean? Be able to see RTP and seeing what's going on down there, going down to like Austin. There's a thriving environment down there. But I look at it like, you ever see like Anthony Bourdain, like No Reservations?
Parts Unknown, yeah.
Yeah, so you go here and you do it from the cloud native space, and then also having like a dinner after. And so you have a round table and you talk about these amazing topics like we're talking about here, right? With the mainstay folks that are there. That's cool on that front. On the Sysdig front, I mean, again, it's what we're doing with those plugins. I'm super excited about. There's so many cool things that we're doing with like CSPM capabilities, all of that, but also the Falco community is so near and dear to my heart. Seeing folks just contributing and when they do that, I'm like, I love sending somebody like a Falco shirt and having them wear it and be like, oh, I love this. I got this like contributor thing. I want them to feel special. I want them to know they're part of this community, just like I felt special when I contributed to Kubernetes. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, we can definitely tell there's some passion there for all the stuff. You got the company, the communities, stuff you're doing with cloud native, podcast. Now you got almost sounds like a Netflix series going on here. So just a lot of exciting things. So Dan, it was a huge honor to have you on today with DZone. Our audience hopefully is going to follow you on Twitter, discover your great podcast, go get involved with Falco, check out Sysdig. So thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Cool. Thank you.